but we will look at the guidelines from state and local authorities to make our decisions. So please be excited and keep that in mind. We have a great program ahead. Just a few housekeeping items to keep our ambient sound to a minimum during today's program. Everyone except our presenters will be in listen-only mode. If you have a question during the program, please utilize the chat function at the bottom or side of your screen. We're excited about this, and we do have a packed program. First of all, we have all faced a lot of challenges over the last 12 weeks. We still have a lot to be thankful for, and President-elect Jerry Kelly will offer today's invocation. Jerry, are you with us?
Can you unmute me? Yeah, good. If you'll all bow your head in prayer. This is the United States Military Academy Cadet Prayer. O God, our Father, thou searcher of human hearts, help us to draw near to thee in sincerity and truth. May our religion be filled with gladness, and may our worship of thee be natural. Strengthen and increase our admiration for honest dealing and clean thinking, and suffer not our hatred of hypocrisy and pretense ever to diminish. Encourage us in our endeavor to live above the common level of life. Make us to choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong, and never to be content with a half-truth when the whole can be won. Endow us with courage that is born of loyalty to all that is noble and worthy, that scorns to compromise with vice and injustice, and knows no fear when truth and right are in jeopardy. Guard us against flippancy and irreverence in the sacred things of life. Grant us new ties of friendship and new opportunities of service. Kindle our hearts in fellowship with those of a cheerful countenance, and soften our hearts with sympathy for those who suffer and sorrow. Help us maintain the honor of the Corps untarnished and unsullied, and to show forth in our lives the ideal of West Point, and in doing our duty to thee and to our country. All of which we ask in the name of the great friend and master of all. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Jerry. Well, we do have a packed program today. We are planning on running 45 minutes, which is unusual, but we do have a lot to cover. Before we introduce some new members, I have sad news to report. As most of you probably already know, our beloved Dr. Fran Kenny passed away this weekend. Fran served as this organization's first female president in 2000. She was a friend to everyone she met, including Bob Hope and Jack Benny. She was a mentor to many in this organization, and many of us owe our positions to her guidance. She was a trailblazer. She eventually became the president of every organization she loved, including ours. Each of us who knew her have a Fran story. She positively impacted so many lives with her optimism and service above self. She always thought of her beloved Jacksonville University, and we're all grieving for her passing. But we know and have confidence that she's watching over us now. So let there be light. Fran used to love that. Fran would have celebrated her 103rd birthday on the 23rd of this month. We will celebrate her life and legacy at a meeting very soon, so please stay tuned. And I see President Costa is on the call with us today. We are looking forward to him in the next few weeks, adding his amazing thoughts on a life well lived and our beloved friend Kenny. Today while it's a sad day with what we're facing with Fran, she would be very happy because she loved this organization so much, and this organization, because of her, is vibrant. Today we have a new member to introduce. Actually, we have two. Jim Agee is going to introduce the Rotary World's newest member. Jim is, we all know Jim. He's a former Air Force fighter pilot who's very active in our organization. Jim has presented to our club several times. He sponsored many new terrific members, and each of us know and respect his amazing resume. In the interest of time, he asked me to keep his introduction brief, but I can't go without mentioning that Jim is currently spending a tremendous amount of his time on a concept he designed and is spearheading our club's Call and Care program. It's our effort to contact every member to see how you're doing and how your club can assist. Jim?
Thank you, Tom. Victory smiles upon those who anticipate the changes in the character of war, not upon those who wait to adapt themselves once those changes have occurred. It's General Julio Duhay. Thought I'd pull something out of the West Point summer harassment program that they had to memorize, kind of appropriate for our situation. The COVID-19 pandemic will change our lives, our businesses, and our world. We're not going to be able to wait until things get back to normal. Chris Michalakis is the first member of the Rotary Club of Jacksonville to be vetted and accepted since enacting the CDC social distancing protocols and the lockdowns mandated by Mayor Curry and Governor DeSantis. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Chris Michalakis, former commander of the 159th Fighter Squadron based here in Jacksonville, is a leader. Shogun has over 2,800 hours in fighters and commanded Florida's 159th Fighter Squadron in Iraq on our first combat deployment since the Korean War. I learned from Chris how to lead volunteers. A Guard Fighter Squadron is composed of citizen soldiers with day jobs and families that demand their attention, just like a Rotary Club. It is full of smart, opinionated leaders who are volunteering their limited time and resources to put service above self. It takes exceptional motivational skills to lead such a group of men and women. It takes a leader like Chris. Chris is a naturally gifted teacher. Captain Chris Michalakis is currently a lead line check airman, instructor and evaluator for Delta Airlines, flying the Boeing 757 and 767. He has over 22,000 hours in transport aircraft. Some of those are the many reasons he was trusted to be the pilot for the Rolling Stones tour that included their concert in Jacksonville last summer. Chris was my first flight instructor on the line at Delta Airlines, teaching me the ropes on the Boeing 727 and again on the Lockheed L-1011. Finally, he taught me how to be a captain and instructor myself on the Boeing 757 and 767. Chris is elegant. In the words of ZZ Top, every girl's crazy about a sharp-dressed man. I have traveled the world with Chris on military deployments, international trips with Delta Airlines, and vacations with our families and friends. Chris's range of hobbies and interests include racing motorcycles and Corvettes, fishing, samurai swords, marksmanship, sake, and whiskey. He and his wife, Yvonne, live in Fruit Cove, and his grown daughter, Emily, lives in Jacksonville. Chris was born in Sendai, Japan, and grew up outside Detroit, Michigan. Chris is a graduate of Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, Daytona Beach, Florida. He earned his U.S. Air Force pilot wings at Williams Air Force Base, Phoenix, Arizona. Chris flew the F-111 in England and the T-33, F-16, and F-15 in the Florida Air National Guard here in Jacksonville. So, why is Chris joining Rotary now, amid all the uncertainty and change? Service above self, the core value that we all share. I encourage all of us to set our newest member as the example and encourage those who share our values to serve with us. I now introduce the newest member of the Rotary Club of Jacksonville, Captain Chris Michalakis, my friend, instructor, and leader for the past 30 years.
Thank you, Jim. Chris, welcome aboard.
Well, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be anywhere. And I'm proud to serve this great organization. Jim, thank you very much for your kind and interesting introduction. You quote ZZ Top and General Duhay. That's pretty good. But I noticed also that you may have violated the first rule of the standard of ethics, and is this the truth? But we'll have to see in the future. Thank you, everybody. I'm glad to be here. Chris Michalakis, Captain with Delta Airlines, and I'm proud to serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris and Jim. Well, we have another new member to introduce. Daniel Davis serves as the president and CEO of our Jacksonville Chamber of Commerce. He has a great deal of experience in all things Jacksonville, having served our city as the president of the city council, the executive director of the Northeast Florida Builders Association, and he's also served in the Florida State House of Representatives representing District 15. Daniel has been married to Rebecca Davis for 22 years, and they have 4 children. He serves on numerous not-for-profit boards in our community. We're so glad to welcome Daniel as the world's newest Rotarian. Welcome aboard, Daniel.
Thanks, Tom. It's an honor to be a part of this august group. I've had several opportunities to speak at the luncheons, and it's an honor to be part of the team. We look forward to getting Jacksonville back to work, creating more jobs in this community, and being safe as we move forward in our new future. So I'm excited to be a part of this group that gives back to the community so well. And we will make Northeast Florida and Jacksonville great and stronger than ever. Honored to be a part of the group.
Thank you. Welcome aboard to you both. It's interesting also, you've just made history by joining our group as the first new members using our new virtual, hopefully temporary for a little while, virtual meeting setting. So thank you, welcome aboard, and we're so glad we could make history with two such outstanding leaders in our community. Normally we would present you with a lapel pin and a badge, but we're gonna have to wait until June to do that in person. So hang tight, we will do that. And we're looking forward to being back together. Bobby Brown is a business lawyer with Foley and Lardner. Bobby's practice is heavily weighted in real estate, including construction and finance, solar energy, and storage across the United States. Bobby attended the United States Military Academy at West Point and served more than 6 years in the Army, attaining the rank of captain. He was an airborne ranger and jump master with the 82nd Airborne Division when he participated in the invasion of Iraq as an executive officer of an infantry company of paratroopers. He was a cadet at West Point, and that's how he met our speaker today, Shane Kimbrough, who is a distinguished speaker and an active astronaut. Please welcome Bobby Brown, who will introduce our speaker today. Bobby, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you, President Tom. I'd also like to recognize my son who's here with me today, William Brown. He's a Cub Scout in Pack 442. And back in February, my father and William and I went to the Kennedy Space Center on an overnight Cub Scout adventure, where we actually got the opportunity to sleep underneath the Space Shuttle Atlantic, which is an extraordinary experience. It's an honor and a privilege to introduce our speaker today, NASA astronaut, Colonel Retired Shane Kimbrough. William is, and I know we are all very excited and appreciative of Shane taking the time to speak with us today about his experiences in space and about the NASA SpaceX launch that's later this month. Shane grew up near Atlanta and graduated from West Point in 1989. At West Point, Shane also played baseball as a pitcher and was captain of the team his senior year. After West Point, Shane became an Army aviator. Though he is trained to fly both fixed and rotor wing aircraft, he flew the AH-64 Apache helicopter and served in the first Gulf War during Desert Storm in 1991. He was a platoon leader in an Apache company. As Tom mentioned, I met Shane while I was a cadet at West Point in the late 90s. At the time, Shane was assigned to West Point as an assistant professor in the Department of Mathematical Sciences. As a cadet, I only knew him then as Major Kimbrough. At West Point, I played on the baseball team, and Shane served as one of the Academy's officer representatives for our team. He traveled with the team on weekend away games. We got to know each other more personally at that time, and I have since enjoyed his mentorship. When I graduated West Point in 2000 to be trained as an infantry officer and to attend Ranger School, Shane moved on to his next assignment, joining the NASA team at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. Shane has had the unique experience of going up to space twice, once in 2008 aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour, and the other time in 2016, launching with 2 Russian cosmonauts from Kazakhstan on the Russian Soyuz spacecraft and rocket. On YouTube, you can see these launches and Shane's re-entry and not-so-soft landing in Kazakhstan in 2017. On the second mission, for almost 6 months, Shane was the commander of the International Space Station, which is a unique science research laboratory that orbits about 250 miles above Earth, traveling at 17,500 miles per hour, orbiting Earth every 90 minutes. Shane has logged in a total of 189 days in space and has spent over 39 hours on 6 spacewalks. In his current position with NASA, Shane is in charge of the quarantine process for the 2 astronauts that are scheduled to launch in a couple of weeks from the Kennedy Space Center. Shane lives in Houston with his wife, Robbie, and they have 2 daughters, Caitlin, who's graduating from Baylor this upcoming week, and Taylor, who graduated from TCU this past Saturday and Zach, who is a sophomore at West Point and who's on the golf team. Shane also has family here locally in Ponte Vedra. It is a tremendous privilege to present to you today a person who I admire greatly and have the utmost respect for and feel honored to call a mentor and friend. I believe he's dialed in, but ladies and gentlemen, Shane Kimbrough.
Hey, thanks, Bobby. Can you guys hear me all right? All right, great.
Yes, Shane.
Well, you kind of covered everything there, so I think I can just go to questions and answers, but I'll provide a little more detail to the upcoming launch and just spaceflight in general, if you guys don't mind, and then we can do some questions and answers here in a few minutes. So again, it's great to be with you guys. I wish I could be with you in person, but of course with COVID, we're not allowed to travel and do events like these. So I'm glad we could link up virtually. Congrats to the new members you guys have. So that was kind of neat watching that process and really incredible people that you guys are building your team with. So thanks. So as Bobby mentioned, the big news for us is we're getting ready to launch a crew from Kennedy Space Center, just a few hours south of you guys. And we haven't done that, believe it or not. We haven't launched an astronaut from the US in almost a decade. So that's pretty crazy to think that that's actually reality. But 2011 was the last time we launched a human from the United States on the space shuttle. So we have a different system now. We don't have the space shuttle. You may be aware. We have private companies now building our spacecraft. We have two companies that won the project and that competed for it and won it. And we have Boeing and we have SpaceX. So both of those are providing vehicles for us now to travel to the International Space Station and back. SpaceX is going to be up first, just by the way things worked out with their testing and sorts. Boeing will probably fly their first astronauts next spring, so almost a year from now, but SpaceX is ready to go here in a couple weeks. On May 27th is the current launch date. It'll be 4:30 in the afternoon, so hopefully you guys can just go out to the beach and watch it fly right by Jacksonville if you're available. There won't be a whole lot of guests, unfortunately, at the Kennedy Space Center for this launch, which is pretty unusual. It's very unusual to not see thousands and thousands of people there, but due to the COVID situation, Kennedy Space Center is not going to be open for guests. So that'll be pretty unique. Bobby mentioned I'm kind of running a quarantine process for the crew now, and all those that are in contact with the crew. We typically, this is a 14-day process leading up to any space station mission, because we want to start isolating the crew from the general public so that they don't take anything with them up to the space station that they might share with other folks that are living there, because things grow and spread pretty rapidly on the pretty confined spaces of the ISS. Now, due to COVID, we actually have stretched this out to 21 days. So unfortunately for me, I'm in quarantine now with the crew and their families. We're all doing it together for 21 days. Once Wednesday hits here in a couple of days, that's the 14-day mark prior to launch. So things ramp up a little bit, and that the restrictions and quarantine get a little tighter. We've been able to home quarantine due to COVID, honestly, which has been nice. We haven't had to completely isolate in the quarantine facility here at Johnson Space Center. So that's been, I guess, a blessing in disguise a little bit, that we can stay at home and quarantine. Now on L-7, so that's a week from Wednesday, we will travel down to the Kennedy Space Center on NASA aircraft, and then we will from then on be living in the quarantine facility at the Kennedy Space Center with the crew. A couple of flight surgeons, which are our doctors, and then the head of the astronaut office and the head of our flight operations director will be in quarantine, living with the crew and myself. So a pretty small group in there, and then we'll hopefully get them ready to launch. They are going to be ready to launch, but hopefully the vehicle and everything and the weather cooperates for May 27th. So that kind of gets you up to speed on what's coming up pretty soon for us. The space station is going strong. We've had people living in space on the space station for 20 years now, which is pretty amazing. So, any of you that have kids, honestly, their entire lifetime is spent with humans in space, which is something that I can't say, and some of you on the line here can't say that either. So I think that's pretty special. I think most kids will just remember, hey, I always had an iPhone, or I always had some kind of device in my hand, but hopefully they'll see a bit bigger picture that we've had humans living in space their entire lifetime. So we've had a couple of challenges with that and keeping that record going with things like 9/11 and other things over the past, excuse me, few decades, but we've been able to maintain that and maintain getting them supplies. As you might imagine, the outpost is pretty remote, so the logistics train to keep food and supplies heading that way and to keep folks alive up there is pretty challenging. But we have a pretty good system now with several companies that provide us unmanned spacecraft that launch to the space station about every 6 to 8 weeks that deliver those supplies and also bring new experiments as well. So the ISS is pretty fantastic. Bobby already gave you a lot of the stats on how fast it goes and how many times we go around the Earth every day, which is 16 going, when we lap, one lap is 90 minutes. So pretty fantastic. Hopefully you've been able to see some pictures from some of my colleagues that we get to take from that perspective. Those are pretty special. They're very challenging to take when you're moving that fast. Another way to think of the speed we're moving is 5 miles a second. And so when you're looking at a little tiny hole with a giant lens camera, you literally have a couple of microseconds to actually take your picture. And, if you say I'm trying to take a picture of Jacksonville, if I miss it or something, or it was just blurry or I couldn't get a good angle, we may not pass over Jacksonville for another 2 or 3 weeks. And then say the next time we come over, I might be working and I can't take a picture, or the next time we come over, it might be cloudy. So it's if you have some places you want to get, as I found out, it takes about 6 months to actually get the good picture that you want of places. I took a really good shot of TPC Sawgrass. If you guys haven't seen that, it's on my social media. But having family ties there, as Bobby mentioned, and going to the players so many years, it's a special place for me. So I wanted to make sure I got a decent shot of that. So I was able to, and lucky enough to get that. But those are some fun things that we get to do up there in our free time. Generally, our work days are 7:30 to 7:30 on a normal day. We're on Greenwich Mean Time up there, which means it's the time it is in London. And so we get up at 6 a.m. London time and then go to bed about 10 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, London time, and work from 7:30 to 7:30. That's the contract, at least, that I had with my crew as a commander, and that we promised to the mission control teams around the world that we were going to give you 12 hours of work every day. And we did get about half a Saturday and Sundays off in general, unless we had some spacewalks or something going on major. But that's kind of how the days play out up there. Currently, we have Chris Cassidy up there, who's a Navy SEAL, Annapolis grad of 1993. He launched just about a month ago, and he's up there with 2 Russian cosmonauts right now. So that's a pretty small group. Normally, we have 6 people on board the International Space Station, but currently we're in a kind of a weird situation to only have 3. We're going to launch Bob Bacon and Doug Hurley are the 2 that are launching on the SpaceX test flight here in a few weeks. Bob's an Air Force officer, flight test engineer. Doug Hurley is a Marine fighter pilot, F-18 pilot. And those folks are very appropriately assigned to that mission, being incredible test pilots and working in the test community. So this will be a huge event for everybody. They'll go up and join Chris and the 2 cosmonauts. The time is a bit unknown right now. We think they're going to be there anywhere from 2 to 4 months. So it's not going to be a true long duration 6-month plus mission like most of the missions are now, due to it being a test flight. But we want them up there longer than just a week or 2 like space shuttle missions were, because we need to help Chris out and help the cosmonauts out, get a lot more work done. And so we're going to try to extend them a few months. And then just on the heels of this flight in late August right now, we're going to launch the next SpaceX mission. And that's a true first operational mission. So we'll have 4 crew members on there, and then they will go up at least for 6 months to kind of overlap with Chris and the other crew members on the space station. And then hopefully by next spring, Boeing will kind of get in the rotation and launch their first test flight. And then after that, their first operational flight. I think I've done enough talking. I'd like to hear what you guys are thinking about. If you have any questions for me, just let me know, and I'll throw the hard ones over to Bobby.
Okay, well, thank you, Shane, very much. We have some time for questions. Again, we're going to go a few minutes additional if we need them, because we anticipated there would be a lot of interest in your presentation. Sherry, do we have some questions?
Yes, President Tom, Bobby Brown has a question, so I was going to let Bobby ask his question.
Shane, so can you maybe expound on like the upcoming launch and the mission, and if it's related to the Artemis program, and maybe talk about the Artemis program, you know, going to the moon, putting the first man and the first woman and the next man on the moon, and what the long-term plans are for going to Mars.
Yeah, thanks, Bobby. Artemis is a big thing for us at NASA now, and sorry I didn't mention it earlier. I was so focused on the upcoming SpaceX mission, but Artemis, just so you folks keep it straight, the Boeing and SpaceX piece that I talked about earlier, that's called the Commercial Crew Program. And so those companies will continue to take us to the International Space Station over, I don't know how long, but over, say, the next decade or so. In parallel with that, we are also ramping up the Artemis program, which is the vehicle and the program and the rockets that will take us back to the moon and eventually to Mars. So, and that's all NASA. So we have our private companies doing the space station piece, getting us back and forth now with SpaceX and Boeing here in the near future. And then we have NASA, we're building our own spacecraft. The spacecraft is called Orion. And so if you see Orion in the news, that's the capsule that the astronauts will be in. The whole program is called Artemis. And so that encompasses the spacecraft, the rocket, and all the supporting structures and programs that fall into that as Artemis. We're supposed to do what Bobby said, put the first woman on the moon and the next man on the moon in 2024. Very ambitious schedule, but so far so good. COVID has slowed us down a little bit with our rocket testing and engine testing, but we still think we can make 2024. So that's exciting. We're going to go to different places on the moon than we've ever been. We're going to go there to sustain ourselves there, not just to kind of go there for a couple of days and come home like the Apollo program did. Artemis, you may ask, where did that come from? Well, in Greek mythology, that is the twin sister of Apollo. So that's why that is named Artemis. And that's the name that we took for the Apollo, or for the going back to the moon mission and then further on out to Mars. A lot of people think we're going to Mars here pretty soon. I hate to burst people's bubble there, but Mars is about 20 years away, probably a couple decades from now, when we actually get the technology that we need and the way to make our astronauts, you know, actually survive the incredibly long journey there. So we got a little ways to go. The movies make it look pretty easy, but it is a really challenging problem that we have to get humans to Mars. NASA has taken the challenge on, and we are going to do that. But it's folks like your kids' age, maybe, or younger, that'll actually be the ones going to Mars.
Thank you.
Wow,
So,
that's quite interesting. We do have some additional questions, and we have some of our young students here today. And their question is, what's a typical workday like, and what do you do on a regular day-to-day basis?
Hey, thanks for the question. Are you talking about here in Houston or in space?
Both.
All right, so I'll do the easier one probably first, in space. So like I mentioned, we're very regimented up there. We get up at 6 a.m. You have about an hour to hour and a half to kind of clean up, eat breakfast, you know, kind of get yourself organized for the day. Because once 7:30 starts and your day starts, you're literally scheduled in 5-minute increments and sometimes longer throughout that 12-hour period. So we have a computer and our schedule's up on a screen, and we have a red line that kind of moves real time across that. And honestly, we joke with each other, we're just trying to keep up with the red line. If you're ahead of it, that's always good. If you get behind it, then you know you need some help to catch up to get everything done that day. So we're kind of driven by this red line to make sure we get all of our activities done. Now, almost every day we're doing experiments and incredible world-class science and research. So that's really what the space station is designed for. And currently that's what we're doing. I would say about 50% of our entire time in space is used doing experiments and research. About 25% of the time up there is spent doing maintenance. This is a 20-year-old facility now. So just like an office building or your home, things break and things need to have preventative maintenance done. So we do spend a lot of time doing some of that maintenance on the space station and the equipment on board. The other 25% is spent doing exercise or your free time. That's kind of where that time comes in. But again, generally 12-hour work days. Within that workday, we have 2 hours that are carved out to work out every day. Very, very important to do that in the environment of space, because if you don't, space is actually tears your bones apart. So it just disintegrates your bones. And we found that out the hard way early on in the space business. But since then, we've gotten pretty smart, and we figured out this protocol by exercising 2 hours a day, about an hour of cardio and an hour of weightlifting or resistive exercise. These machines we have on the space station are amazing. And by doing that 2 hours a day, we come back with very minimal bone loss and bone density loss, or zero. Like in my case, I had zero. So it's an incredible protocol that we have, and very, very important that we take it seriously in space. Let's see, my typical day here in Houston, it's always different. Now is a little unique. Obviously, I just do a bunch of telecons and meetings like this all day, like most of you probably do, because we're working from home. Trying to get this vehicle launched and being in quarantine with the crew has been very challenging leading up to this, because normally I would spend about half my time down in Florida at the Kennedy Space Center getting things ready to go. But I got a few folks that are doing that for me now, and it's just a little harder to kind of get things ready to go for this launch. But hopefully that gives you a little feel for what it's like to work in space and as an astronaut here on the ground.
Great job. Thank you so much. A couple of other questions. One is, what level of Russian language proficiency is required for you and other American astronauts?
That's a good one. We all have to speak Russian, and that's been the case over the last decade, because the only country that had a vehicle for astronauts to launch in over this past decade has been the Russians. So because of that, we had to train in Russia quite a bit. Everything in that Russian spacecraft is in Cyrillic, which is their language. So a totally different alphabet. And the language level, we had to be a certain language level to even be assigned to fly on one of these missions with the Russians over the past decade. And so we have a language school at the Johnson Space Center with Russian instructors, and it's one-on-one. So it's you can't hide in the back of the classroom like we all like to do in a lot of language classes. So you really had to do your homework. And we're all very motivated to do it in order to be, on the list to be assigned to one of those flights. And then once you get assigned, I would say you probably do 2 or 3 language lessons a week, continuing to work on your vocabulary. And it's all technical Russian that we really need to know, right? It's not, hey, can you order a cup of coffee, or where's the bathroom, that kind of stuff. It's the NASA lingo, but in Russian. So it's really another language in its own. And so that's what you kind of really start focusing on once you start being assigned to one of those missions. I was assigned, usually you get assigned 2.5 years before the flight. And so just think about every other month of that 2.5 years, I was in Russia. So I'd be in Russia for a month, I'd be Houston a month, all training and back and forth for a couple of years. So that's pretty challenging, but by being, really immersed in the environment over there, you learn a lot more of the language. And so by the time I flew, I felt, I won't say fluent, but very comfortable with the technical Russian that I needed with my crewmates in the spacecraft to respond to emergencies or to just do the normal checklist, things like that. And then in space, it's kind of funny because each crew is a little different, but the way we did it in space is if I was talking to a cosmonaut, I would speak in Russian and they would answer me in English. And that way we both kept working on our language skills and, hey, I forgot the word for this, help me out. But I won't say every crew's like that, but that's the way we thought it would work the best, and it did pretty good for us. So anyway, it's an incredibly challenging language. It was neat to learn something that difficult. And now I go over there. I've been over there many times since my flight as a family escort for other families going to launch, and just being able to get around Moscow and order food for everybody and talk to the locals is it's pretty unique, and I'm glad I got to learn the language.
Great, thank you. Another question they're asking is, are Boeing and other manufacturers looking at recoverable technology like SpaceX?
And so what I think they're talking about there is their rockets. If you guys haven't seen, SpaceX will launch a rocket and then they actually fly it back to the ground or fly it to a barge, which is absolutely incredible. Some people think that they're just showing the launch in reverse, but that's not true. They're actually flying it back and recovering it and using it on a future flight. So pretty amazing there. And if you're asking if Boeing is doing that, they are not doing that currently. So that maybe that's something they'll do in the future, but with the current plans they have, they are not planning on recovering their rockets.
Got it. Do you know if there's any talk about operations for spaceport at Cecil Field in Jacksonville?
No, I don't know anything about that. That's interesting. We have an airfield here in Houston that we fly out of as well, and they've made that a spaceport. I don't really know what that means because we're not going to be launching out of here or landing out of here, so I don't know what that means or what that designation gets you as an airfield. But we have one here, and hopefully Cecil will get it as well. I remember Cecil when I was flying Apaches in the Army out of Savannah. We would do a lot of work down at Cecil with the F-18s, and have great fond memories of that, even though I know the F-18s moved up to Oceana, I think now, but really, really great memories of that airfield.
Okay. President Tom, how much time do we have? We have a couple more questions.
Yeah, we have time maybe for one more question. Keep us on track.
Okay. One member is asking about your opinion and talk about disclosure regarding UFOs and if you've ever witnessed any other identifying aircraft.
I have never seen a UFO, so a lot of people want to know that in space. Oh, you've been to space, so how are the aliens and what kind of UFOs did you see? And honestly, if you look out the window on the space station, you see something, that's a really bad day. Because anything that close to you going that fast could potentially hit you and really, really make a bad day. So thank goodness there are things sometimes, we call it space debris, that kind of come into the area that we are. And we have really, really great folks, U.S. assets that kind of track all those things for us. And if they're getting, within a couple hundred kilometer ring of us, then they'll actually, it's kind of like an emergency situation. Mission Control will tell us to go either kind of hunker down in a certain module or else actually get into our Soyuz spacecraft in case something actually hits the station, and then we can just depart and come home. So we have measures to guard against things that are flying around in space, and there are quite a few. Thank goodness there's not a whole lot at the altitudes that we're at, just about 250 miles above the Earth. If you go higher up in the 1,000 miles or so, that's where all the satellite constellations are, and there's a lot of debris up there. So that's something we got to think about when we go to the moon and Mars. We have to actually transit through those areas, right? And so another challenge that we have to get the astronauts to the moon and return them safely.
Thank you, Shane. Really appreciate you being with us. This is one of the things I love about our new Zoom format is we can reach out to incredible presenters like you and have you join us. And we appreciate all you're doing for our country, our space program, and beyond. So thank you very much for being with us today. I want to thank everyone who's working so hard behind the scenes. As our businesses begin to resume again, we're eagerly looking forward to the day we can once again meet in person. Certainly, I want to thank Kelly Shaw and others who are holding Zoom happy hours. We're having a great one. I attended that last week, and Tracy Jenks, I see you on the call. We had a great time. I want to thank everyone who was involved in that initiative, especially all of you who are working behind the scenes. Chris and Daniel, we welcome you to the club. We are so honored to have you with us. We look forward to being in person, and I can present your pins. I want all of you to think about joining us for May 18th. We're going to celebrate our annual USO Day. Fellow Rotarian and Executive Director of the local USO will offer a tribute. We're also going to feature Congressman Michael Waltz. Michael is the first Green Beret to serve in the Congress and has an amazing story in his own right. Our own Scott Eder will introduce the congressman to our club. Scott is a retired senior CIA paramilitary operations officer and a former Green Beret himself. So this is one you do not want to miss. Again, I want to thank everyone who's been a part of this, and we look forward to seeing you next week, on May 18th for our Rotary Zoom at noon. Best wishes, everyone.